welcome to episode 5 of the Arc-Aholics. If you're into Arc Raiders, hang out with us as we discuss Arc Raiders and other extraction shooter related topics. All content creator guests have their channels posted in the description down below. I encourage you to check them all out. Like, comment, subscribe, and all that fun stuff. Now, on with the show.
Call up the Guinness Book of World Records because we've done the impossible. We've gone 5 weeks in a row producing an Arc Raiders podcast immediately after Embark threw water on their game. I'm your host, Men in Boxes, and I'm joined once again by Gecko of the Gecko Frontier YouTube fame.
How's it going?
Also, don't call him an Aussie, but do check out his YouTube channel. Rockhoundblack returns this week.
G'day. How you doing, mate?
Yes, he's the one that talks like that. And then last but not least is a new voice only known by the name Josie, which is not a Clint Eastwood reference. Josie, can you say hello?
Hello. It is, you're correct. It is not a Clint Eastwood reference. For my Blink-182 fans out there, it is a Blink-182 reference.
I think we're all Blink-182 fans here. Without saying. Okay. All right. Before we kick things off, I wanted to ask Josie on what he does for a living and how that may give him a different perspective on what Embark Studios is trying to do between Tech Test 2 and October 30th. Take it away, Josie.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm Josie, like Boxes just introduced me. I've been working in product for software companies for the last 10 to 15 years or so. I graduated in computer science, and so that's kind of how I got into that track. Always enjoyed tinkering with software, building software. And a lot of what product is, which is what I do now specifically, not software engineering, is around the decision points around different products, measuring how well the product's doing, understanding how it resonates with your users, and setting up tests. So often what product teams will do is they will devise tests to understand how users are engaging with their content, how that content is progressing over time, and then ultimately, how do you monetize that content? And so, talking about Arc Raiders and Boxes, it was very true. They definitely threw some cold water on the fire. Everyone was very excited, but I think it was pretty apparent to me, even as well as the game ran, that it was certainly they were not gearing up for a release. And you can tell that in a couple of ways. I was actually one of the people who originally posted in the Reddit for Arc Raiders around the Nexon release, and you could kind of read through some of the notes in their first quarter earnings, and they specifically talk about some of the things that they were looking to test in this latest playtest. One was it was clearly a marketing push from on one end. Rockhound, I know you're part of the content creator group, but clearly, I know Shroud had disclosed that they had paid him to play the tech tests and kind of promote it a little bit, and clearly they've done that with a lot of other YouTube influencers, and that is a good way. That's clearly one of the things they were looking to do is raise awareness around this game. And honestly, I had not really, I had heard of Arc Raiders a couple of times, but I was not really well versed in what they were offering, and so this was the first test that kind of captured my attention, and so I'm sure that's the case for many others. So definitely a marketing push was probably one of their goals, but the other is to measure a lot of things about the engagement and retention of the game. And so some of those things will be, the tech test wasn't very long, so they're probably looking at user growth day over day. When the game actually releases, they will certainly look at daily active users, weekly active users, monthly active users, things like that. But they'll also start to measure, hey, how long does it take people to progress through the content? I know that was a big talking point in some of the previous podcasts around, some of the people really grinding it kind of got through in 40 to 50 hours, and they were kind of at the end game. So that they will measure things like that. They will look at things like, clearly the game was engaging. I know Steam charts were up day over day in terms of the number of players coming into the tech test, but it's a good sign that clearly people were engaged. But they will look through, okay, if a lot of people got through the first 50 hours of content and were kind of in the end game. And I don't think, to be honest, that was what they had planned for the end game, but that was kind of what we were presented with. But they will also look at things like when players did drop off, where in the game loop did they tend to drop off the most? So they will look at all of that data and they will compile and build in additional content to solve those problems. But I think they've clearly chosen to go for a very immersive game. And I do think they'll continue to plan updates of content even after we do hit the initial in game. And I think we all know for games like this, the end game tends to be PvP focused anyways. But I'm very curious to see what they do with the PvE aspects over time and all the events and possibilities they have. But yeah, sorry for the long-winded intro, but yeah,
Oh no, that's
that's kind of
great.
what I do every day.
Yeah, it's
Josie,
good.
when I spoke to you the first time, were you telling me that a lot of these companies try to do a monthly kind of marketing cadence for their games? Was that
Yeah,
was
I
that
mean,
you?
that was not me, but I can speak a little bit to kind of
Okay,
how
okay.
product overlaps with marketing. So your product team will typically interact with marketing by telling them, here's where our game is strongest, here's where our game is weakest. These are the points that we want you to promote, and here's how we stack up in the marketplace. So here's something unique that we can provide to players or to our end users that they might not be able to get elsewhere. And I know this was, again, a previous topic of discussion on this podcast, but thinking about all of the different extraction shooters that have kind of come through this market, it's still a relatively new genre, despite what maybe some of the internet masses tend to think at times. It's still a fairly new genre. And so it's really important for Arc Raiders to differentiate themselves in the marketplace. But I don't really think you've seen that full marketing team spin up from Embark yet. You will, for a paid game, a premium $40 game, you will see a huge marketing push with both YouTubers again, as well as more traditional methods of paid marketing via social media and things like that. So definitely expect both of those to be coming in the late summer here, early fall. And then yeah, you'll continue to see the product team connect with the marketing team and tell them, hey, here's the planned content updates that we will have. And the cadence can differ. It doesn't have to be monthly, but
Okay.
it's just it depends on whatever schedule they have set internally, and that can be different for everyone. So
Okay.
And
Well, it seems like
Josie,
it. Oh, go ahead.
I was actually just going to ask a question, which was previously we've sort of talked about the response to the tech test being so overwhelmingly positive that it almost seemed like the marketing team didn't really shift to account for that, and they've kind of just stuck to their
yeah.
plan, which ended up being a bit of a mismatch with massive hype and not much marketing going on. Do you feel, what are your thoughts about that potential
Yeah,
mismatch between marketing and the actual game?
yeah, there definitely was a mismatch, and I think you saw that from the apology message that they put out, where clearly they understood afterwards that there was a mismatch, and maybe they didn't quite realize the level of it heading into the Summer Games Fest announcement. But these types of projects, and I know Arc Raiders is going on many years in development now, but that October 30th date has probably been set for quite a while. And you build in product, you build your timelines and roadmap around your resources and your constraints, right? So they know how many engineers they have, they know how much work they're putting out on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, and they will work backwards from that date to make sure that they can get all the content in that they'd like to get in. And so clearly, I think it was clear to everyone that engagement was super high in the tech test. And you can tell that people were really engaged. Social media exploded with people talking about it. I don't know I didn't speak to anyone or see anyone on social media that really played it and didn't enjoy it. And so clearly the engagement was high, but I think the mismatch there was, obviously putting a countdown timer to a countdown is probably not the best of Easter eggs from the engineering team. But it's a date that they've likely had set for quite a while, and it's very hard to pivot away from that date. Certainly, you can extend, and I know we're going to talk about that with Marathon coming up later. But that date is very hard to bring closer to the current timeline, even if hype is really strong around it. It's very hard to all of a sudden accelerate that development cycle and make sure that you're getting all of the testing, all of the monetization plans, all of the um, you know all of the gameplay loop, just ironing all the bugs and how am I trying to say it? Like it's not just testing
Polish.
for individual bugs, right? Yeah, it's making sure that hey, this user they'll do things like session replays where they look at how a user interacts with their menus, right? Where do they get stuck? Do they log off after they get stuck, or do they persevere through? Right, so they will watch all of that data and understand that um, you know packaging all of that and bringing it 4 months earlier than anticipated, even if you wanted to, is sometimes just unrealistic.
No, I have to push back real quick here because he did have a very broad statement. saying that he did not see anyone with any kind of negative influence on the or opinion of the game, right? But like, clearly IGN has their pulse on the community and the gamer landscape here, and they saw fit to say this game was just, the most it's okay kind of game. So I mean, there's a little bit of a wrinkle in your assessment there.
This is fair.
Yeah.
I think you got me there, Gecko. I agree.
Jared Petty had to move because of the Arc-Aholics were surrounding his house, so he went underground and he left his abode. Yeah, it's funny. It's funny listening to a rational voice, Josie, because I approached Gecko to start this kind of podcast of whatever we're doing here, because during the peak of the tech test 2, I should say, I heard so many comments saying like, this is ready to go. It feels so good. It felt like at the time we were a month or two away from maybe a bigger opening, maybe a early access or something. But it's funny how you're saying that like, actually this is like, this is all decided many, many months in advance, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There is extensive planning done, and it's a little bit different in something like an Arc Raider situation where this game's been in development 5-6 years at this point, and so your targets for each year look slightly different, right? But they've likely had this October 30th date or sometime in October circled, probably the month of October circled for at least 6 months, if not longer. Probably longer, probably more like 12 to 18 months. And again, that's because you got to think of everything that goes into game development, right? The people that are involved, right? I know Embark is based in Stockholm. You're going to have a large portion of that team on vacation, and you hear these talking points on social media, and some people shoot them down. But these are real challenges that product teams and engineering teams face. Is if I'm trying to wrap up a game production, and again, it's not just the game production, it's the monetization plans. How are we going to charge for the battle pass? How is the artists that are building, skins and animations, how are they going to package those up and have them ready for the monetization team? How are we going to market that content? There's a lot of stuff that goes into all of this. And just saying, hey, hype is really strong right now, we're going to accelerate this timeline by 5 months, it's almost impossible to do. It's very, very difficult.
So, given that, what would you do in that situation where hype is much higher than perhaps you expected? What would be your response if a movement of the release date isn't possible?
Yeah, and I think that's a really great question. I think this is something that, at least from what I can tell, Embark does not seem to be very strong in is community management, right? There's really no voice that people can look to and say, hey, here's the progress with the game. Here's kind of what our plans are. And sometimes this backfires. I don't know if I've been playing a lot of Splitgate recently. I don't know if you guys have kept up with kind of what's been going on that front, but they've had some PR blunders and just some marketing problems where the game's really good and people really enjoy the game, but they almost have too much access at times where you kind of know everything that their leadership team is thinking, and sometimes that can be a problem too. But I think it's a good sign, right? Like the product and engineering teams, I can guarantee you right now are talking about, they're excited that everyone wants it now. They're excited that people are talking about the level of polish, right? That means the engineers and the QA testers and the product team did their job, right? They want you to have a seamless, polished experience. But again, I don't know how big Embark is, probably several hundred employees. Yeah. And with a team that size, there's probably a limit to how quickly they can put out additional content. And like I said, it goes beyond just game content, right? Like loot items and the types of arc enemies they have. But the things they're going to put in the battle pass, like finisher animations, if that ends up being a thing, or gun skins or player skins, like they probably have a limited number of engineers that they have to spread out, and sometimes the animators are different than what the core backend team is doing, right? Who putting in all the metrics so that they can measure things, and all of the backend systems that store loot, and all of the balancing gameplay decisions that they make. But I think from a marketing perspective, you want to feed into the hype. You want people excited about this game. But I do think that something like a countdown is just a misstep, because you basically, when you leave things super open ended, people fill them in with best case scenario, right? And everyone has a different best case scenario in mind, and that ultimately just leads to disappointment. So I think I think where Embark could grow the most is learn to engage with their community in a way that gives more frequent updates without overpromising things or being
Mhm.
so vague that people fill in the blank with their mind.
Yeah, 100% agree.
And there's another thing, a factor as well, is that there is such a thing as giving too much information, right? To the point where you're just kind of giving white noise. I think a great example of this was the last year of Grey Zone Warfare. It kind of became a meme among people who played it, in the sense that the amount of information they were giving out, it essentially was just a countdown to another countdown to another countdown. It was just kind of just this long running, like, oh, I got notification, I got an email, newsletter, we're putting in this, we're gonna drop a new announcement. Okay, you gave me a letter for, or a email for a new announcement. All right, cool, I'll show up for that announcement. The announcement goes, all right, cool, and the announcement is, we're gonna like reveal something in like 30 days. And it's just like that happened multiple times. So obviously, without the crescendo that Arc Raiders had with its tech test, to magnify the flop of that, when you do that enough times, people just tuned out at that point. And so I think the smart thing for Embark at this point, if they're going to drop information, should be kind of poignant. Like a great example would be Sand. It's the game Sand. Is they'll just give you screenshots of the new stuff they just made. Like, hey, this is a new item we're adding to the game. Here's a screenshot of it, and then just let people talk about it, right? And that can be enough. It could be a screenshot of the new map, or a screenshot of a new weapon, like things of that nature. And so it just lets people know, hey, this is what's coming. Be excited. It's gonna be here, but just kind of give us crumbs to kind of feed us along the way. And
Yeah.
with a
Yeah,
launch,
even a picture of a new arc, right, would be
oh,
a great
absolutely.
point.
You can even make a game out of it. You'd
Yeah,
be like,
do you,
week one, you can release a screenshot of it, but like from like one angle and obscure. And then like next week you do the same thing, but from a different angle and a little bit less obscure. You can kind of like let people kind of go wow with that, in terms of like creating what they think the full thing is gonna look like. You can do a lot of fun things with that.
yeah, I noticed their remember the animation video of them using machine learning to teach the Arc how to walk? I've seen that video absolutely everywhere. And I think that kind of content is stuff that, you know, online social media really enjoys seeing, right? Like we want to see the inner workings of what they're working on, right? And like screenshots are much easier to produce, right? Like they could pump that content out like crazy. But even just packaging up these little animation videos for us to see what they're seeing on the inside as they build this game, like that's the kind of stuff that would keep people interested without, like you said, going so far that people just kind of tune out because it's so much noise.
For sure. And I think the contention here as well, I'm okay with Arc Raiders being delayed, essentially delayed. It was never really delayed. It's just on track, right? More so than I think the average player, is that for two reasons. One, I've had the game wishlisted. I'm just gonna be a humble flex here, since December 2021. So 5 months really ain't that long at the grand scheme of things. But secondly, having played the Cycle Frontier, being a Cycle Frontier refugee, shout out to all my refugees out there. I know more than some that a bad launch can spell doom for your game. It will be a slow death, but it still will be a death. So for me, I don't want another game that I play and love to end up that way. So I rather, when the game comes out, it is as tight can be, and there's like, it's going to launch with absolute precision to the point where it will succeed beyond what I can think of. And so, yeah, we've been saying let them cook for years now. What's another 5 months?
And also the let them cook after Tech Test 1 was, it was different than let them cook after Tech Test 2, because Tech Test 2 really is what Arc Raiders took off on, right?
Oh, for sure, because there's no NDA anymore, and
Yeah.
so everyone kind of got a
Yeah.
chance to see it. Plus, also there was the countdown and all the other posts, whatever, that kind of led people on. So that was what I think made. We talked about this last week. That was when people riled up. Had they not had any of that, then we wouldn't be here. But we kind of just beat that one to death last week, though.
I do want to ask Josie one more question here. So you say Embark's big weakness right now is their lack of communication. All right, but here's where my brain goes when you say that. I think of the last 10 years, I think of the multiplayer space, and how many multiplayer games have skyrocketed out of nowhere, right? So you have like Lethal Company, Repo, Among Us, all these kind of like, there's so many of these types of games. Like PUBG was a big one, where it's like, it was almost like like these games aren't like made by these big, expensive AAA publishers, and they're doing insanely well on the market. So how important is actual communications with fans 5 months before release? Because part of me says it's actually not that important.
Yeah, that's a great point. Let me clarify something too, though. When I say it's important, I think it's more in response to the question that Rockhound asked around um, when there's a big mismatch, right? When the expectation is much higher than what's about to be delivered, then there needs to be a level setting of expectations, and I think that's when communication is really important. I agree
Okay.
with you in terms of a game's popularity. I don't think you have to give. I don't think you have to give updates or really a ton of communication in order for a game to go viral. And that's what I think you're seeing from games like Repo or these smaller indie games that end up with massive audiences. Is they went viral, right? The gameplay loop was good. It's fun. It's
Yeah.
entertaining. It's engaging, and then it hits the mainstream, right? Like you get YouTubers talking about it. You get people on Reddit and Twitter and all these social media sites are talking about these things, and people's friends are saying, "Hey, do you want to play this game with me? Like, I just downloaded it. Someone else showed it to me." And so I think we live in a day and age where if you can get your content to be very viral, yeah, you don't need traditional communication. You don't need some community manager to make a post on Reddit or to send an email out to the player base, right? But I do think it's important when there's a mismatch in expectations to communicate with your fan base.
And
Fair
Men in
enough.
Boxes, something else around that. I think we need to remember that there's about 50 games a day that are released on Steam. So
That's true.
it's very easy to get
And yeah,
bias coming
cherry
in, right?
pick.
We don't talk about the losers that never got anywhere, right? Because we
Right.
just talk about them. But you do talk about the one or two independent games that you know went like a
Yeah,
rocket.
that skyrocket. I guess I bring that up because I'm a little obsessed with the single player space as well, and it seems like marketing a single player game is like totally different than marketing a multiplayer game. I mean, you want that first month in single player to be as big as possible, so you kind of want all your marketing dollars to you know really front load that game because those single player games really don't have super long tails except for rare cases Skyrim and whatnot. But it seems like multiplayer is like the bulk of your revenue for a multiplayer game is going to be well after the first month of a multiplayer game, right? So I guess I put it in that context, but I do hear your point, Rockon, for sure.
It's interesting you say that because just before we started this podcast today, I was looking at some of the marathon trailers and just reading some of the comments under the cinematic short that they put out, like that 8-minute cinematic, and
Yeah.
it said, "This makes me wish Marathon was a narrative-driven solo game," and it's like such a good point that cinematic really almost set it up like that. It was like marketing
Right.
associated with a solo game, but it's not.
No, later on in this podcast, I'm going to ask about that particular point as well because that's an astute observation for sure. Um, Gecko, do we have any more questions to ask Josie right now, or should we move on to the bulk of our show here?
No, I think we can get on to the main topic at hand. Josie did a great job of outlining his expertise and his knowledge base, so we kind of know where to go from here fantastically, by the way.
Josie, last thing I'm going to say. Look into your crystal ball. Are we going to get an update from Embark in the next 30 days? Yes or
Next
no? I don't
30,
want
oh,
the next
next
30 days.
30
You think we're going
days.
to do it? Yeah.
I don't think you'll get it in the next 30 days.
Ah, darn it.
If you do, it will be something very small. But you absolutely will hear from them late summer, early fall. They will not want the player base to go cold. You will see something from them between now and let's say September.
Oh boy, we're in the hibernation phase right now. All right. The way you do an Arc Raiders podcast during the doldrums is you talk about Bungie's marathon. Obviously, last week, Bungie delayed Marathon out of its September 23rd date. They released a blog post with some key information on the delay. Before I read the juicy parts of that post, I want to get a vibe check from the three of you on Marathon. Uh, Gecko, the internet, if the internet was a person, you know, it was a pretty negative response to Marathon. Did you feel like the internet was fair to Marathon?
Well, the internet's never fair, but it
No,
it, it is
no.
what it is. but I don't know. I feel like it gave them the response that they set themselves up for, right? It's almost like they had a great example of what Arc Raiders did, working its way up in for the Summer Games Fest, whereas Marathon had this trailer to to another trailer. Essentially, it was a trailer. Hey, save the date. We're gonna release gameplay footage. Blah blah blah. It was a trailer to a trailer, right? And then the day came. There was this huge event. They added on. I'm a Marathon, creator. So it's transparency on that one, but I'm allowed to say whatever I want to say. And they had this huge event, streamer event, everything, where they're, not even giving out keys, but like high class, signups, I guess. And they just put on this big pony show, right? This big, huge show. And then they released, these videos for in-game content. They also announced when the alpha was going to happen. And then they also announced a release date. I feel like that whole situation was just mismanaged. We come to bring it back to communication. So they put up a front. They said, here is, our confidence that this game is ready to go, because we're giving you a release date that's relatively soon. We're giving you a set of videos of a game that's being played by these, high end streamers that are we're proud to show off. We feel like we're supposed to be proud to show off this gameplay, and the whole internet just went meh.
Yeah.
And so I think the art thing that didn't help either, but I think they were having issues well before that happened. But like, I think the internet gave them exactly the response that they set themselves up for.
Yeah. To speak on Josie's point of like communication, I feel like Bungie's communication was pretty awesome, but it was the product that was kind of weak. Rockhound, what do you think of what Gecko just said?
You pretty much just took the words out of my mouth. It's almost like the two games are a reflection of each other. So that Arc Raiders is a great game, and the marketing just wasn't quite on form. And then Marathon's kind of flipped around the other way. The marketing was clearly AAA marketing levels, but the game didn't quite match the marketing.
For sure. So Gecko, on a scale of 1 to 10, how excited are you for Marathon, or how excited were you for Marathon after that big media blitz?
Well, I mean, until I got my hands to the game, I was kind of reserving judgment in terms of like optimistic. I was optimistic, but I was also kind of just I want to see I saw some issues that I outlined in some of my videos about my issues with the game, which we'll get into, because they are tackling said issues in some of these bullet points that they released. So I was very hesitant, but I was optimistic about it, because I saw a game that could fit into extraction shooter space without shoving Arc Raiders out of its own spot, having played Arc Raiders already at that point. So I'm like, oh, these two games can coexist. Whereas before I was kind of worried about that.
All right. I want Josie to respond to this. Josie, here's where I'm at on Marathon. Bungie back in 2017 or 2018 decides to make an extraction shooter. I think that is the greatest idea in video games. A big AAA FPS oriented studio making an extraction shooter. It doesn't get any better than that, right? Fast forward 7.
I was going to say, I completely agree, by the way. Completely agree.
Beautiful. Fast forward 7 or 8 years, and I think what we got is a simplified action-oriented extraction shooter. Now, I ask you this because you're putting a lot of time into Splitgate too. You seem like you're more twitchy, fast-paced player. So, do you have maybe a more positive response to what we've seen out of Marathon?
Yeah, I'm excited for Marathon. I'm still excited for Marathon. I know the product they gave us in the alpha, and I did not get to play the alpha. I tried, but I did watch a ton of gameplay around it. I agree. The product didn't live up to what we were communicated from. I'll even say from an art style. I know there was a whole debacle around that as well, but even the art style didn't, to me, feel like the cinematic trailers that got released. And I know we're going to talk about some of the points that they're going to address in just a little bit here, but like, when there's a mismatch, right, between what I'm telling you I'm going to deliver to you and what I actually give you, that we were talking about fairness earlier. I do think it's fair to criticize that, right? You told us you were giving us one thing, we got something else in return. That's not okay. But that's also kind of the point of these alphas, right? Like they are to gauge whether users are engaged with the product or not. And when that's not the case, I think they made the right decision to delay this. But I still think Marathon can be a great game. I really do. There's a lot of talented people working at Bungie. I know Bungie's not in what many would consider its heyday, and it's going through some corporate issues, if you want to call it that. But I still think Marathon can be a really great game, and I agree with Gecko. I do think it can coexist with Arc Raiders. But I will say, and again, I know you guys talked about this maybe on the first or second podcast, but I do think there's a limit to the size that an Arc Raiders or a Marathon can get to.
Interesting. Okay.
Multiplayer is already a very niche, in the gaming industry. It is a big niche and it's growing, I think. But single player games still kind of dominate the market, and mobile games actually, worldwide. But I do think that you will have people that will play both. I think you will have fans that settle into one or the other, and you'll have, I see Reddit posts like this all the time. It's like, hey, I've got $40 in my Steam wallet. I can pick one game. Which game is it going to be? Right. And I kind of went through that recently, looking at things like Arena Breakout Infinite, or um, what's the other one? Delta Force. And I know those are free games, but people were asking like, hey, I want to dive into one of these games. Which one do I do? Right. And people are talking about all the different pros and cons. There will be an element of that as well. So I do think they could eat into each other's top end growth, but I do think they can both be successful and live side by side. But I think both games being good would be a benefit to the entire community. So I'm still positive and hopeful for Marathon, and I'm going to play it regardless. So.
All right. Rockhound. He said one quick sentence. I don't know if you caught it. He said he believes that Marathon can be a great game. Do you think Marathon can be a great game? I think that's pretty, I'm a little iffy on that statement.
Yeah, I hope it can be a great game, and I do think it can be. The post they put out kind of I had some concerns about some of the things they wrote in there, and some things that I was pleased to hear as well that could push it towards being a great game. But I agree with Josie. I think there's definitely room for both Arc Raiders and Marathon to both be successful. I don't think one denies the other.
All right. Well, since you brought up the post, let's jump into the post itself. All right. So give me 60 seconds to read this to you, and then we'll pick it apart. Okay. So here's what Bungie released last week. Quote, over the next few months, we'll continue closed testing, including participants from the alpha, to deploy gameplay updates and test new features as they come online. Some of our immediate focus areas will be, 1, upping the survival game. And they list 3 bullet points under that. More challenging and engaging AI encounters, more rewarding runs with new types of loot and dynamic events, and making combat more tense and strategic. Number 2, the second pillar. Doubling down on Marathon's universe. Increased visual fidelity, more narrative and environmental storytelling to discover and interact with, and a darker tone that delivers on the themes of the original trilogy. And the third pillar of what they'll be focusing on over the next few months here is adding more social experiences. A better player experience for solos and duos, and then prox chat so social stories can come to life. Gecko, what jumped out at you here?
It was the additional social experiences. Out of my review of the game, the 3 major issues I had with the game that I felt like were the biggest points of complaint that most people had, 2 out of 3 of them were addressed in this particular post. 2 of them being a better experience for solo/duo players and a proxy chat. I feel like in this day and age, making an extraction shooter that cannot give a good solo experience is just destined to not do well, because there are so many people who play these games by themselves, or at the very least want the option to play the game by themselves. And then there's proxy chat, whereas every single extraction shooter to date has had proxy chat. And I felt like if anyone could do it, it'd be Bungie as well. But it felt like I didn't buy either of the predominant stories as to why they didn't want to do it. So that leaves a third option, which is not flattering at all, which is why I never put it up, because I don't feel it's fair.
Wait, what do you mean by that?
Well, the two stories that we got for why there wasn't proxy chat came from two different places. One, it was basically to combat toxicity, which is just um, children leave the room, horseshit, because you can easily you can easily build in a feature, just turn off. Like, hey, if you don't want to experience that, turn it off, call it a day. That's just too easy. Like, I'm not a developer, but at the same time, it's like, if every single game in the multiplayer space can give you a way to like mute other players, I don't see why Bungie couldn't figure that one out. So that's one. The other one that was kind of heard is it was basically there was a lot of gray area when it came to laws and it came to internet communication, particularly out of Europe. And I'm like, well, every other game manages to do this. So again, I don't buy it. And so the third option would be laziness. And so I'm not going to accuse someone of being lazy because they clearly probably work very hard, but like, not necessarily laziness in terms of the developers themselves. Is more laziness on the leadership of not wanting to put in the work for what they feel like is not an adequate system that's worth pursuing. Clearly the community convinced them otherwise.
All right, let me hit back on you on that, and we'll see what Rockhoundblack and Josie say about this. So their two keys here is a better player experience for solos and duos. When they said that, it seems like the issue with Marathon is they have a character that goes invisible, and when you're playing a solo match, everyone just goes invisible, and it like ruins the experience, right?
And that was the third issue that I brought up in my particular critiques of the game that was not addressed in this post.
But here's my question. I don't understand how that gets fixed. Like, does anyone here understand how that invisible character like improves in the solo experience?
It makes it worse.
Yeah, but I mean, Bungie is clearly trying to correct this, right? But I guess I just can't even theory craft in my mind how they fix it. Like, do you remove the character from solos so everyone has to play the other, 5 or 6 characters that are available?
I think if you have to remove a significant percentage of the available characters for a solo mode, that tells you there's a kink in your structure, the fundamentals of your structure of your game. Like for me, like like I can go all day in terms of the way hero shooters do, or the heroes or character mechanics don't work in extraction shooters for a variety of reasons. This being one of them.
Yeah. Rockhoundblack or Josie, what how are they going to fix this solo experience? Let's go with Rockhound. Rockhound, go ahead.
Thanks. I think firstly they need to give solos the option to go in by themselves. Exactly as
solo against solo.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right. And so Embark, the way they've done it, they've said that 9 times out of 10 or thereabouts, solos are going to be facing solos. But for the sake of matchmaking, sometimes they might end up putting a duo or even a trio into a solo match to, fill the numbers up.
Fill it up, yeah.
Which in a way, it kind of puts people on edge. It's almost an added element to the game.
Yeah,
thinking
I love it.
That I might come across the squad, but chances are I won't. So that's probably the main thing, is giving solo players a place for them to have a fun experience without it being impacted by squads. Probably the number one thing I would say for solos.
So Rockhound, you're not buying this whole the invisible character they have kind of ruins solo. You don't buy that.
Yeah, I'm not. I pretty much sit actually with Gecko, and I'm not a fan of that sort of hero feature anyway. I would prefer that anything like that where it's in a way, as an example, the finals they had early on when the game came out, they had a recon sense where people could see other players across the map, and essentially wall hacks, and eventually it just got dropped. And I think Marathon probably need to consider actually just removing that feature, and because I don't think it adds to a lot of other players' enjoyment.
I'll add on to that.
Go ahead.
I'll add on to that. Totally agree about the solo mode. In product development, we refer to this as like a barrier to entry. If my barrier to entry is that I have to find 2 friends to play with or roll the dice with 2 random teammates, that increases my barrier to playing the game on any particular occasion, right? So having a solos and duos mode just lowers that barrier and lets me choose, hey, if I'm free right now and I've got a half hour before I need to go do something and I want to run a raid, I don't have to coordinate with anyone else, right? I can hop on the game, launch a solos match, and I'm in. So I think that's just, I don't even understand why you would, in the product development cycle, not consider adding those modes, right? Like it does nothing but benefit your player engagement. Same with proximity chat. But
But
as far as yeah, go ahead.
well, I you know I swear I've watched so many responses and videos and whatnot to it. I literally think what Bungie would say to what you just said is we have an invisible character that everyone just uses, and it kind of breaks the solo experience. Therefore, we won't offer solo experience.
Yeah, well, I totally agree with Gecko. That is a sign that your foundation of the game, of the balancing and the abilities is imbalanced.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
I I, I also totally agree with both Rockhound and Gecko that I'm not a fan in any type of shooter of having something that I can't see shooting at me. Right, like visibility is one of the most important things. Information in these types of shooter
yeah.
games is so important. And Splitgate is going through this right now as well, where I wouldn't call it unbalanced, but there's a character essentially that has you can scan the entire map and you get wall hacks for, I don't know, 4 or 5 seconds. Um, but their solution was there's a cooldown. You can only use that ability every 30 or 45 seconds or something like that. And even if you die, that timer is persistent, right? So you still
Okay.
have the cooldown. So I
Mm.
don't know what the answer for the invisibility problem is. Maybe it's some sort of cooldown. I'm not a fan of that type of ultimate, anyways, for a hero like that. So yeah, either I doubt they're going to want to redesign the entire hero ability, but perhaps maybe a cooldown. I don't know. I think there probably is a gameplay mechanic that can balance it. But yeah, my preference would be that they just find a different ability altogether.
Yeah. I know the finals. The finals has an invisibility, character or ability, and it seems like they allow you to see the character at a certain distance, right? So it's like it's kind of invisible, but kind of not.
But you
So
also
I don't
don't
Yeah,
use
know.
their
when they're
stuff
I
when you
guess I should
when
do
die.
that.
when they're
Yeah,
moving, you can kind of see a
and you can
it's
hear it.
describe it.
Yeah,
Yeah, you can hear it. It's got a buzzing noise, and you can just see them when they're completely still. Very hard to see.
But
Um,
it's also
so
it's a game that you don't lose things when you die. Like that changes the
right. Yeah,
dynamic of what's considered appropriate and what's not appropriate for a game.
yeah,
And so and I feel like in comparison, Rockhound brought this up too, and I would really want to like magnify on this is that with the way Arc Raiders does, it's not they give you this solo experience, but it's not so strict. Like the matchmaking isn't so strict that it's guaranteed. So like when you're a solo, you're never guaranteed to run into only
mhm,
solos. It's a high probability, like a very high probability, to the point where you don't feel like it's unfair, but it's never guaranteed, right? And that's the same thing for duos and trios. You're never guaranteed to just run against two people or just run against three people. And I feel like that's such a great way of keeping the tension. You're always on edge. Just because you just down three people, all right, cool, I've down three people, that means it's max. Yeah, that's sure, but I have to worry about third parties as well. But if it's just two, is there a third? Or is it just one?
that's
Is
right.
there a second? Or is there a third?
It slows the gameplay down too, right? Because that when you see another player, you're going to go, okay, I'm not immediately going to push towards them because I want to figure out, are they a squad
more
or
information.
are they by
Yeah,
themselves?
Or are there two solos teaming up, which comes down to proxy chat as well, back to the same feature. And the way they did it is that, for one, the audio is so excellent, is that you can hear people much better depending on what's the sound it's carrying and whatnot. So it's done really well in terms of its execution. But again, it adds on to that same factor. Like these two pillars add to each other in such a way that was simply not allowed when proxy chat wasn't there. And so, that's why I think they got hammered so hard that they were basically forced. We have to change that.
Yeah, there's also a technical benefit to it where, if it's off peak hours and I'm solo and I'm trying to queue a game, it doesn't take 15 minutes for me to find a match, right? Like I can um I'd prefer to be matched with other solos, but if those players aren't available, it will
yeah.
likely throw me into a raid with larger team sizes, right? So it's a benefit. It can maybe sometimes be a detriment if you feel like you are getting into a lobby where there are more than just other solos. But I agree, it keeps the tension up, and for a game like Arc Raiders or a Marathon, that tension is what drives the entire gameplay loop.
Yeah. I'm not sure, but I think I've heard that Escape from Tarkov has crazy long queue times, and that is considered the most successful extraction shooter on the market right now. So I don't understand how long queue times work in that game, and people aren't put off by it, but
Well,
I do hear you.
like we discussed like last week in terms of the kind of players that it attracts. So, it's people are willing to wait a little longer. That's fine.
You're getting a
Um,
deranged player base.
Right, and also, it's the best extraction shooter on the market, but it's also one of the only ones on the market. So,
Yeah.
it's doing really well for itself in terms of like the numbers that it's putting out for an extraction shooter, but for like say a much bigger AAA kind of game, not so much. But like that's not to take away from what it's accomplished, which is like to take a game that's relatively niche in a genre that's relatively niche for like Milsim and then make it into as large as it is, which is an accomplishment. But the long
Yeah.
queue time is consistently something that I hear from people who play it as one of the things that they don't like about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Rockhoundblack Gecko also brought up Proxy Chat, but let me tell you where I'm coming from with Proxy Chat in regards to Marathon. I watched all the gameplay videos of Marathon. I never saw a moment in the gameplay of Marathon where I said to myself, "Oh, I wish I could talk to the other player," because it just felt like, you have a lot of experience with the finals. The finals is such a hot game. It's so, fast paced that I feel like you don't get opportunities to have actually compelling conversations with your opponents. Whereas in Arc Raiders, I feel like because it's a little slower paced, because you can corner peek a little bit, it seems like that lends itself to, and also like you want to take down difficult arc, you're gonna have to kind of team up with other players. I just didn't see that in Marathon, so I kind of bought Bungie's at least decision not to include it. What did you see there?
Oh, that's a good question. It certainly fits in Arc Raiders. I had some great
Yeah,
proxy chat
yeah,
conversations, most of them hilarious, and I've watched quite a few streams of other content creators, and everything I saw was pretty much the same. The odd salty person, but generally it just came across as funny anyway.
yeah.
Um, and of course, the studio can always provide ways for people to report stuff that's just not, any
Too
sort of
much.
toxic behavior that's over the line, right? Um, I I feel like Marathon might be right on the edge, and I still feel like it would provide better gameplay being able to have some proxy chat because of that funny interaction rather than not having it. But I think from what I've played of both games, Arc Raiders definitely has. It seemed like more time to have that conversation
Right.
I have a
with
question
an
for Rockhound.
opponent. Yeah.
So when you had those proxy chat interactions, were you predominantly solo or in a squad?
Mostly in a squad actually, and often it was after if we got downed. Quite often
You'd
we
beg
would
for your
just,
life.
a few times, like actually I've got a funny story about that, but often it was just saying like GG, well done, because we had a good gunfight and they beat us. So we had a few of those conversations where it was actually just respectful and going, that was a really good gunfight and you guys beat us in the end. One thing I did hear in game, which was absolutely hilarious, is we were trying to get out of Buried City to extract, and we ran past this building, and we could hear like a solo player or maybe the last person left in their squad and at least a duo or maybe a squad having a conversation in a building, which was basically the solo guy going, don't shoot, I just want to extract, and the other guys are like, we're not going to shoot, we promise we won't shoot. And this went on for maybe a minute. We just kind of stopped and listened to it, and then it ended in Quentin Tarantino style with just multiple gunshots going off and then no one talking. Which was very funny
What
as
the
an
heck?
outside observer, at least. So I think it can add a lot to the game. It's,
Oh, I asked the question because mine is like the exact opposite. Like the majority of my proximity chats. I mean, other than what you were saying in terms of like GG, this, that, and the other. Like, I feel like that's kind of like low hanging fruit in terms of the possibilities of what a proximity chat goes. A lot of the proximity chat that I had that was way more extensive was when I was solo, and it was like either team ups or like just temporary ceasefire while we both kind of like extracted together, like things of that nature. And
yeah,
I feel like that's way more likely and prevalent in a solo situation because, you're when there's like two or three of you, you guys are on your own independent comms, so you're way more likely to be able to successfully betray somebody. And also the amount of firepower that's available to both sides at that point is so high, the threat is so high that proximity chat really doesn't seem like a viable thing to really consider. And so to what boxes was you were saying in terms of like, well, if they don't have a solo mode, then the proximity chat gets kind of neutered a little bit. And at least that's how I feel about the situation.
Yeah, I didn't play enough solo rounds really to, maybe I played 3 or 4 in total, and the rest were squad-based rounds. So it sounds like you have a better feel for it from a solo perspective.
And mine was mostly
Josie-
duo, but yeah, I had a couple of solos. But yeah, that's basically whenever I was in solos, there was a much higher probability of like proxy chat being used.
Josie, where are you at on proxy chat with Marathon? Did you see opportunities of that present itself there in that game?
Yeah, so you were right earlier. I do tend to skew towards more competitive type games where I can be a quote unquote sweat. But I saw moments where I think proxy chat would have been helpful. I mean, I just like calming to my teammates in general, right? And especially if you're not going to give me the ability to play solo and I'm forced with 2 other squad members, yeah, I want to talk to them, right? Like I want to be able to tell them, hey, saw a team moving from this direction, or hey, I've got a guy down. Like we're in a 3v2 now. I think those types of comms to your teammates are incredibly helpful when you're trying to be very sweaty. Now, I'm sure some people like to just vibe out and take their headset off and just play the game. I certainly had many teammates of that nature, and that's fine too, right? Like whatever you want to do. But I do think that prox chat is incredibly important for stuff like that. Even if others can hear, sometimes just being able to let your teammate know information, and especially in these games, like I mentioned earlier, information is so important, right? It's like most of the gameplay loop is around who has the most information,
Guys,
especially when you talk about being competitive.
am I wrong, or is proxy chat strictly about talking to the enemy? Proxy chat's not about team talk, right?
No. That's different.
No,
I think
okay,
I think
okay.
I think
Yeah.
com chat is one thing,
That's
voice chat is
that's
one thing,
yeah.
and then proxy chat is a completely other.
All right.
Correct me, did Marathon have team chat in
Yeah.
the alpha? Oh, they did. Okay, nice.
Yeah, it did. They didn't. I guess they didn't invite friend groups, which may have reduced the amount of team chat, but team chat's in it.
Yeah, so like the ability for them to do prox chat then is essentially the same exact technology, right? It's just
Yeah.
which user in the lobby has permission to hear you.
Yes. Yeah. All right, Josie, we're going back to you on this one. This is the dumbest part of the entire blog post from Bungie, and it says this: they're doubling down on the Marathon universe, more narrative and environmental storytelling to discover and interact with. Actually, maybe I should go to Rockhoundblack on this. I don't understand the why these companies want to introduce story to a multiplayer PvP game. I don't get it at all. I want to shoot people, and I want to survive. I want the story to be my choices that I make. Let's go Rockhound. Do you care about the story in these games?
Yes, I do. And
You do.
I think the multiplayer part of it is only one aspect of the game, and it's certainly a big aspect of the game. But there are definitely play styles that you can have where you can play more like a solo player, as in solo game, and explore the map. And you can definitely do this in Arc Raiders. I had a couple of rounds where I didn't interact with any other player, and then the narrative side of things becomes more important because you can take in what's going on and graffiti that's painted on the wall, and you can actually have that as an interest as a player. So I think it's important. It gives people other options for ways to play the game.
Okay. Yeah, I guess everyone was raving about the one thing it seems like Bungie did real well was that 8-minute narrative video that they produced, the high quality one. And to me, like Rockhound was saying earlier, that I'm like that should be attached to a single player game. It should, I don't care about it. Like I didn't even watch that full 8-minute video because all I care about is shooting other human beings, right, in the digital world. But everyone's certainly
Appreciate the
different.
clarification.
Yeah, in the
Minecraft.
digital. Right. Let's see what else we've got here. Does anyone have anything else to bring up here with the blog post in particular?
Yeah, I have, and it was actually in the blog post before we started reading, and I'll read it out. It says, "Through every comment and real-time conversation on social media and Discord, your voice has been strong and clear. We have taken this to heart, and we know we need more time to craft Marathon into the game that truly reflects your passion." And when I read that line, I was like, hang on a minute. The game shouldn't reflect our passion as players.
Yeah.
The game should reflect the developers' passion as game makers. And to me, like now, and it's hard to it's easy to overjudge these things because someone, maybe in the marketing team had to write this, and maybe they just decided to put your passion instead of ours in there as a split-second decision. But it feels to me like Bungie are a little bit wounded from this experience and doubting themselves. At least that's what comes across in that line. And I want to feel like actually what they should be taking this, whatever it is, 6 or 12 months now that they're going to extend the date to the release of the game. They should be taking this time to really put their passion into the game to make a game that players absolutely love. And the blog post didn't really come across that way to me. It felt like actually it feels like they're still searching for answers.
I know I'm personally.
I'd actually like to respond to that really quick. I can tell you from personal experience, they definitely are probably wounded internally. I have released products to large audiences before that have failed spectacularly, and it is a humbling experience. And so I can tell you that the people working there are certainly feeling that feedback. Now, I find that interesting, though, because I came away from this blog post, and just to tie a circle on some of this conversation, part of the reason I feel like this game still could be great is because all of the areas that they mentioned here were the biggest areas of feedback that I thought they captured the audience's opinion well. And I think the post came off to me as we understand that the product was not up to the level that we told you it would be. And the three major pillars that they listed, I felt like did capture the feedback. And so I came away being like, okay, they heard the audience, and if they can actually address all of these points, it will be a great game.
Yeah, I agree with that. It felt to me like it was that, but also that they're lacking a little bit of confidence right now.
Yeah, I think so as well, in terms of just, I mean, like Josie said earlier, in terms of like all the Arc Raider individuals, people who are working on their game are probably elated to hear everyone loves the hard work they put into it. Inversely, Marathon developers are probably hearing, hey, your game shit, sorry, and then they feel a certain kind of way about it, and who could blame them? But in terms of, to tack on with the story element of it as well, is that like Marathon has such a rich story background, to not try to like tap into it, it's kind of a waste, don't you think?
I can't understand that, because I just think the Marathon IP was basically dead for 30 years, and I would say less than 1% of the players who are going to be into the new Marathon are like big fans of the old Marathon. I just don't. Those games weren't even that popular back in the early 90s when they came out.
I mean, that's fair. That's fair, but inversely, you do have this there. You have a built-in IP that you're going to use.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know. It's one of those things where, and you say that, with Rockhound, when you were saying, hey, a game of their passion, what if they didn't want to make this game the way they want to make it? Like, what if they actually wanted to make a single player game, but like, you know what? Extraction shooters are the big thing right now. We need to make this, it fits in our portfolio much better than in accordance with our other games. And like, maybe their passion's not in it. Who knows? But it is still.
Part of me feels. Oh, sorry, you go on.
No, I mean, at the end of the day, it's one of those cases where like it's a job. So I imagine if you're some kind of coder or developer or whatever particular job that you go into, and you get hired by a company and they're making a game that you're not a particular fan of, well, that's kind of the possibility of what I think probably is the majority of people, at the very least, with their first jobs, when they're not big enough or credentialed enough to be able to choose at that point.
Yeah,
I feel like I was just going to add. I feel like from the very first announcement trailer, and that Marathon being 30 years old, I think there's a nostalgia element, which is kind of nice as a foundation story. But I think you're right that actually there's very few people that are still going to be playing it that played the original one. I did actually play the original Marathon. I'm one of those few people. But it felt like from that original trailer, where even the art style felt like this very realistic, like characters with almost like plastic-like bodies, to the gameplay, it felt like that ended up not making the game that originally started out sort of trying to make, and it felt that crossed a line more towards a Fortnite kind of feel, with a slightly more cartoonish, and a very subtle difference between those two things, but enough to notice.
Oh, I don't think
how I interpreted that. Here's what I interpreted that with, though. I think what they're trying to do with this is they're trying to get this to run on every toaster imaginable, and I feel like that first vision was like kind of a maybe a more technically difficult game to render on lower end machines, and this feels like, by all accounts, it seems like this thing runs smoothly, right?
But here's the thing, though, right? Like, the art style itself was already kind of a risk, right? Let's, Arc Raiders, as unique as it looks, that's not a very risky art style. It's a pretty, it's a NASA punk. It's a unique art style for sure.
Yeah.
But like, you're using Unreal Engine, everything's kind of sort of photorealistic. It's not a risky art style. Whereas what Marathon was doing, that was kind of out there in terms of what was, within the I don't know, within the window of what's considered, acceptable sci-fi-ish looks or whatever. They were kind of pushing the envelope a little bit, which I can certainly appreciate. But there was such a dramatic dramatic difference between that 8-minute cinematic and the actual game itself. And so,
Yeah.
and they do put it on there, increased visual fidelity, right? And so you can easily say, well, it's an alpha, it needs several, graphical passes. It could probably look absolutely stunningly gorgeous. Hell, it might even just straight up look like the actual cinematic by the time they're done. But when you reveal it for the first time, the art style was already primed to be disliked. Revealing it in the way that they didn't exactly help things.
Yeah, Gecko, I don't know if you saw this, but there was I can't remember which content creator on YouTube did this, but they had a side by side of not just the visual fidelity in terms of like the graphical resolution and all the post effects, but this content creator had done a side by side where they showed your screen from like Arc Raiders, and then they contrasted it with Marathon, and the amount of text on the screen of all of the indicators and all of the HUD elements, it was so overwhelming.
Oh
And
yeah,
I
the
think
HUD
even
effect was
just
dirty.
even just dialing that back and letting me immerse myself in the world that you're building, let me enjoy the art style that you're crafting, right? Like you did take a big risk and you're putting a lot into this art style. And scandal aside, like they want that to be front and center. And so let me enjoy it, right? Like strip back some of the HUD elements, give me, increase the fidelity, right? Get it closer to that cinematic. And like you will certainly have players that dive into just the narrative side of it. Boxes, I'm very similar to you in that my enjoyment out of these games is outsmarting other players, taking
Yeah.
their gear, right? That is my enjoyment, but I fully recognize that these story-driven elements drive a completely different part of the player base who otherwise wouldn't touch a game like this. And I appreciate that from a gameplay loop perspective because the amount of variance that you run across from game to game makes the game really immersive, right? There will be teams that you just absolutely stomp through, and then you'll run into a team that's very competent, right? And you might get stomped. And so like that dynamic I think really propels these types of games, but I think even if the story isn't for you and I think there are players out there that want them to lean into that side of things, and I can respect that.
Yeah. It's to continue on with this. You do hear like, oh, I wish this was a single player like FPS game, but then I ask, and Rockon, I want to hear what you say to this. Where are the AAA single player FPS games today? It feels like the entire market dried up for that. So it's like I hear people say they want it, but it's like the market clearly doesn't support what you want, right? I mean, I know they're talking about Half-Life
Yeah.
3 might be in the works right now, but that could be an extraction shooter as well. Let's hope. Cross our fingers.
Yeah, it's a hard question for me to answer because I simply don't play enough of them. I tend to
Yeah.
almost always play multiplayer games, multiplayer shooters.
Yeah.
So
Rockhound, they don't exist. They don't exist
Yeah,
anymore.
I'm inclined to disagree. Honestly, there's a decent amount of them. I just don't particularly play them, so I think it's easy for us to say there's not a lot of them.
Name them. Just name me a couple from the last 5 or 10 years. Like Titanfall. Those Titanfall games were somewhat popular,
pretty much,
right?
well, any multiplayer game that has a single player campaign counts as one as well. That's just you can lump them together.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's probably not what the majority of people who play them for, but you have plenty
Yeah.
of things in that regard. You have, again, because I don't play them, I literally just disregard them. And it don't necessarily have to be first person shooter. Like Space Marine 2 came out, that was huge. I know that has multiplayer components to it, but like the big campaign was kind of the main draw.
True.
There's that. And it depends on what you think about in terms of the single player aspect. Necessarily not just single player, it could also just be co-op as well. Like you have plenty of co-op shooters that have come out and done fairly well. Like Helldivers is a great example of that. So I don't think necessarily any particular place is dried up. I think it's a matter of if you're looking for them and whether or not they fit the style that you want. So I can say, because a lot of people can say, well, there's plenty of extraction shooters out there. There's Dark and Darker, like, which I don't particularly care for, so it doesn't really it's not really an option for me. So it depends on how you view things and what seems the option. But to circle back on the story element of it, it also affects gameplay as well. Because I'm like you and Josie, I don't particularly care for the story aspect of it. I think it adds a lot of context to what you're doing, and that's kind of important. But ultimately, the gameplay loop is what's important for me. But that affects gameplay aspects as well, like the loot. That's one of the bullet points they put on there in terms of like more rewarding runs, new types of loot, dynamic events. And I think the build aspect of it, like the extraction shooter genre, like the builds meta or the build, whatever you want to call it, the build craft, so to speak, is a super important thing of the actual genre. People love sit there and goes, you know what, I'm going to build my gun this way, have this kind of armor, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to try to be like a quote unquote budget build, things of that. People enjoy that aspect of these kind of games. And so I feel like Marathon.
Question for you guys after, by the way. Sorry.
Sure. And then Marathon has such a leg up when it came to this build craft because they started adding elements to these items. So for example, there's items that for the backpacks, for example, the backpack, you can heal faster when you have this backpack on, or your stowed weapon starts to reload itself slowly. And there's other items where when you revive someone, you and your teammate both run faster. Like these aren't just strict, I do X number of extra bullets or X number of extra stamina. They had those items for sure, but they had more elaborate things. And I feel like they had a really good ability to like really lean into that build craft, but I think they fell short in two different ways specifically. For one, people, when they see cores and they see implants, I know it's part of the lore, right? But implants, it doesn't connect quite as much as like body armor, or quite as much as like, I have like these boots or these gloves or this like helmet that I'm wearing. It's not quite the same. And so it kind of detaches a little bit in terms of your value. It's just another X, pixel blob that I have to put on my characters to get XYZ stat. That's the first thing I think kind of fell short. They kind of need to make it a little more personal that way, more relatable. But the second thing I feel like that really fell short on is that there was no way to actually build craft. It came down to basically randomness of what you found. And so I felt like they left a lot on the table there, because if I could sit there and go, you know what, I really do want to lean into this hero mechanic. I want to make this guy a sniper character, so I'm going to have these kind of attributes so I can actually make it like this. Or I want to make this guy more of a tank or a close range so I can make these attributes. You couldn't do any of that. It just came down to pure luck.
Yeah. I thought the developers did say that they're also focusing on adding new loot, which will aid in that problem, right?
Right, to a point, if they're leaning it in the right direction, because those two different kinds of issues could simply be unresolved if they just add more loot. Those two issues will still remain.
Yeah, Josie, hit us with your question.
Yeah, how much of the bullet points and feedback that we saw from Marathon were directly inspired from Arc Raiders? Because as I read through these bullet points, so many of these things are what Arc Raiders does really well. More challenging and engaging AI encounters. Making combat more tense and strategic, increased visual fidelity, a better player experience for solos, duos, prox chat, right? Like these are things that Arc Raiders all nailed. And so I'm curious, how much of Arc Raiders' success do you guys think Marathon internalized and said, that's the bar we now have to meet?
I think it's two possible answers. They can both be correct. They can both be true. One, they took all the feedback that everyone gave them and then decided these were the things they needed to work on. And then they look at all the things that Arc Raider gets praised for, and they decided, well, these are all the things we need to work on anyways. But I think you're not wrong in that these things are things that Arc Raiders excels in their own particular way, which is kind of why we're talking about it now in an Arc Raider podcast Marathon. So it's just not just what happened recently. It does pertain to Arc Raiders in the sense that they handled these specific items in their own unique way that I think resulted in a very successful, or hopefully to be a successful game.
Yeah, Rockhound, can you add to that?
And they've had plenty of time to do it, right? So one of the things about Arc Raiders being pushed back and the finals being brought forward is it gave the Arc Raiders developers plenty of time to produce a game which has all of those features that Gecko just described. The one thing that I think that Marathon might really struggle with is the increased visual fidelity and it was probably the thing that put me off the game the most, was the fact that they have this sort of neon cyberpunk art style. It makes it quite hard for them to convey information through the HUD, because if we take Arc Raiders as an example, with that dystopian NASA punk kind of style, almost photogrammetry kind of realistic foliage and so on, it's very easy to put a digital like message on the screen that shows you where your teammate's player tag is, right? And it stands out really obvious.
It pops off, yeah.
That's right. But in Marathon, if you put a player tag on the screen, like I had times when I struggled to I would do a 360 and I still didn't know where my teammate was. Like I can't see where their player tag is, because that neon style is so busy that it's hard to actually see the information that's being conveyed to me. I'm not sure how they're going to work around that. They're going to have to be very clever about how they improve the visual fidelity while providing a really good HUD.
Liquid glass.
What was that?
Oh, that's an Apple reference. That's an Apple reference, right?
Yeah,
It is, yeah.
maybe.
No, good. You bring up good points there. I don't worry too much about HUD, because I just from personal experience, I feel like I haven't played a game where the HUD prevents me from enjoying it, or the HUD, like I think about the HUD that much. I just hope it works, and it seems like most games do a decent enough job to recede, so it recedes into the background. But I guess everyone's different there too.
Well, it could just be one of those issues where, like, it doesn't prevent you from flying the plane, but it adds drag. Enough drag, eventually will bring the plane down.
No plane crash references on this podcast, okay? It happens too frequently now.
Right. It's just one of those things, though, to add on to what Rockhound mentioned. It was actually this one video, this creator, he actually praised Arc Raiders for its lack of hit marker. And so then he made a gunfight. He goes, cool, let's just remake this gunfight. He played the gunfight, and now let's remake this gunfight with hit markers now. And it just looks so atrocious. It's like, dude, like, just a hit marker on its own, like in a, even with the little, like, like audio cue of you hitting someone, just being so intrusive. Like the way Arc Raiders does it in such an informative way, but doesn't feel intrusive. It just feels part of the actual fight, part of the world.
And also speaks to how good the audio in Arc Raiders is. It's sublime. Like that information being conveyed, whether you've hit their shield or, the audio information that you're being provided makes up for a very simple HUD, because both of them together work so well together.
I think it's the best audio design of any multiplayer game I've ever played.
Hunt Showdown fans, you just pissed off a lot of Hunt Showdown fans.
That's fair. I have not really played Hunt Showdown, so if you're out there and you're screaming at me right now, I am sorry. I'm not imposing on Hunt Showdown.
I've played both.
No, we can all agree. Really? Oh, good to hear.
Oh wow.
Not by much. This is not by much though. So that's the thing. It's like, hey, it's up there. But maybe because I just prefer the game more. That's probably why my bias is at. So like, hey, you know what? Maybe I'm wrong. That's a preference thing, but it's up there. It's like, damn.
Well, audio certainly adds tension to these types of games. When you just hear footsteps, like how close were those footsteps? So
yeah, and for the AI, it wasn't even just like they made different sounds at different moments in the game, and I fell in love with that. Of like, when you're spotted and you hear that screech of the bastion, right? Like it's terrifying.
Oh, it sees you. Yeah.
And or just the little beeps and boops as they're just flying around, right? Like it's engaging, and like I enjoy being immersed in that environment. It definitely adds to the tension of the moments. And you've got even the music. Like I saw a lot of people mention, they're like, I always turn music off in the settings, but I actually think I'm going to leave it on for this game. Like it adds so much to the experience. And I think like these are things you never hear in multiplayer games these days,
And for me, it was always the gunshots, right? Is that the spatial sounds? Like when you hear a Pharaoh shot, right? And you can hear the sound, not just the gunshot, right? 'Cause that's just easy stuff, right? I'm talking about like the sound traveling away from you. For anyone who's fired a firearm in like an open air range, or,
that's awesome. Yeah.
It's like you can hear the shot traveling away from you. You hear the bah! Right? That's that in my I get my inner Ric Flair moment when I hear that. I'm like, oh.
No, can't wait. Rockhoundblack, guess what my mom's favorite part of the podcast is? She says her favorite part of the podcast is when it ends. So Rockhound, do you have any final thoughts here before we close up shop here?
Final thoughts. I'm really, really pleased that Bungie decided to delay Marathon. I think they absolutely have done the right thing. I hope they give themselves more than adequate time to do it. And I hope they believe in themselves and make a game that is from their hearts and not solely based on player feedback, but includes player feedback. And then I think we might end up with two games that are very similar as far as how good they are. That would be great, and still have their own space. So that's
well said.
That's probably my summary of it.
Josie, what about you? Final thoughts?
My final thoughts are that I'm excited for both games. I'm super excited for Arc Raiders. I am going to grind the absolute hell out of it when it drops on October 30th. And yeah, I hope that by the time Marathon releases, whenever that is, I hope, like Rockhound says, they give that team adequate amount of time to put out something that they're proud of and that we can look at and say, yeah, this is a good product. Like, I enjoy this game. And I probably won't put as much time into it as I will Arc, but we'll see. I mean, this is kind of the fun part of being a gamer, is that, you get awesome releases like this that drop from time to time, and every now and then, the product's really bad. So it's up to us to judge that, and yeah, so I'm excited, looking forward to both.
Excellent job, Josie. You did a great job on your first ever podcast here. Okay, I think
I appreciate that, guys.
Yeah, Gecko, close up shop for us.
I just want to thank everybody for showing up today. I know with Arc Raiders having such a distant window of time in terms of when we have to see it again or get to play it again, the content will be harder to kind of talk about, but you know what? If you're passionate enough, you will find all the little things to be able to talk about and to really kind of excite people for anyone who's listening. I hope you really enjoyed it. I'm super excited for Arc Raiders, but I'm actually happy because my original thought on Marathon was that they were going to death march this game out, ready or not. And I'm super happy to be wrong. Like, I'm actually, I'm happy to be wrong because ultimately I want Arc Raiders to be super successful. They're going to play their game. I'm going to play their game. I'm going to just really grind it out. I'm going to make a bunch of content for it. I'm going to love doing it because I've been waiting for it for literally years at this point. But I also want the opportunity to play, another game here and there, just to see what that's like. But also I think both games existing in tandem is going to be better for both games and better for the extraction shooter genre as a whole. Competition breeds excellence in this regard. So thank everybody for listening. Thank everyone for showing up.
All right. Join us next week. We'll be talking about world politics next week. So
we will not do that.
Oh boy.
We will not touch that with a 10-foot pole. And good night.